That I'd like to introduce Jack Daniel. Jack is, I guess, the founder, one of the founders of the first BSides in Vegas. He's also probably the guy that's put the most effort into keeping the international BSides organization running. He works for Tenable Security, who is paying his way here. So we're very blessed to have him, and he's going to deliver our afternoon keynote.
Thank you. So let's see if we can figure out technology here. So I'm going to push that button. Look at that. Hey. So let's start off on a sad note. I'm gonna kick in and go a couple of different directions. But first, some of the older folks in the room and amazingly a lot of younger folks in our industry know that we lost one of the most amazing people in our industry last week. Becky Bass. If you don't know Becky or of Becky, you should. She left South Alabama to become a Fed, was instrumental in early network analysis and intrusion detection when she was at NSA before what they became. She is influential in the careers of a lot of the people that founded the companies that our industries are built on, particularly if it had anything to do with looking at network traffic. She had the nickname the den mother of intrusion detection. She yelled at me, not really, but she gave me crap for calling her that. She said she preferred the cranky broad. She died unexpectedly at 61 last week, and a lot of us in the industry are still reeling. But I bring it up not to be depressing. I do that later in the talk. I get depressing. But the most amazing thing about her is that she was a mentor and a friend to everybody. I mean, we lost Howard Schmidt like a week before, who was significant in our industry, and he was a great guy and he had a lot of friends. But Becky was somebody that come in for the big hug. It's just that she reached out, grabbed you by the heart, and we're all going to miss her. But I realized, it's like, oh, those of us that were lucky enough to know these people, we owe you something, those of you who didn't. So I have always done a lot in community. I feel good about it. I'm redoubling my efforts to help build stronger communities, help people individually as well as professionally. And that's in large part because InfoMom has left us, but she left us a little homework. Which segues into another project of mine that I'm going to briefly mention, Shoulders of InfoSec. This is a horribly ugly wiki with a whole bunch of people on it that founded our industry. It's primarily security folks, although thanks to Davi Ottenheimer, there are quite a few of the hacker folks in it. There are sections on the early antivirus people and web app sec people. The web app sec section was really depressing because there are 2 people in that list of like 40 or 50 that are my age or older. Everybody else is a kid. But anyway, there's some cool stuff there, a lot of great stories. If you know anybody that should be on that list, let me know. If you go there and see people that you know and you've got a story about them, especially the folks we've lost recently, Howard Schmidt and particularly Becky, share them with me. And if it's about Becky, I'll share it with her lifelong partner, business partner, Terry Gilbert, who's got an amazing memorial. So if you want to hear about an amazing person and have your allergy medicine and Kleenex handy, follow the link on Becky's page to everything that Terry's collected on her. But Shoulders of InfoSec, because here's the deal about this. If you've been in this industry for decades, or if you're just trying to get in, as soon as you land, you run full speed just trying to keep up. We don't have a chance to look back over our shoulder and figure out how we got here. So I started this to force myself to learn and also do a series of presentations on it so that in an hour you can get a quick thing. But moving on to what we're doing. So you are here. Actually, we're a little south of that, right? So we're not quite in the downtown, but you're here. This is the 3rd BSides Oklahoma. This is big. It is great. It is great seeing young folks. It's great seeing old people, other than myself, you know. But anyway, you're here. And one of the things I would like to stress is that if I click the button in the right direction, it works better. You're here, but you're also part of all of this. This is the places that have hosted a BSides in North America. You're part of this community. You're part of this community. I took this screenshot a week ago. It is outdated. Luxembourg is not on there. Delhi, India is not on there. I believe, yeah, Myanmar, what used to be called Burma, is up there. This is event number 317, since a few of us kind of threw an event together in July of 2009. 317 events globally since July of 2009. This is the 15th BSides of this year. There are 38 more that have dates set for 2017. We're going to break past, last year there were 70 around the globe. So we'll probably be at about 75 this year as a guess. 103 different cities around the globe in 27 countries have hosted BSides. The green dots, by the way, are first-time places, including Kampala, Uganda, and across Europe and Asia, and it's amazing. And you're part of it, which leads me to something. How many people is this their first BSides event ever? That's awesome, because I want to talk to you about the Founders Circle. So a lot of organizations and a lot of events have their founder circles, and you get the special pin that says, I'm better than you because I've been doing this, and this is my 62nd, 63rd BSides. BSides is different. We're a growing community. Growing structures need growing foundations. Every single person here is part of the Founders Circle because you're what this is built on. You're what the industry is built on. You're what the community is built on. So, whether this is your 60th event or your first event, welcome to the BSides Founders Circle. Welcome to our community. Thank you for joining us. And I mean that truly. So the talk itself, so the theme is, preparing for the storm. The talk itself is put on your own mask before helping others. Something important to point out. I'm going to talk about stress, burnout, and preventing it. And if nobody gets any value from it, it means that none of you are suffering from stress or are in danger of burnout. None of you have friends, family, or coworkers in that situation, in which case you're going to be bored for an hour, and that's good. Yeah. So anyway, why this topic? Go.
Hello, this is Danny, in-house psychologist for Norton Corp.
Danny, I'm sick of typing. I want to quit, but I don't know how I'd support myself if I did.
Well, ask yourself this question. What is it that you really enjoy about typing? Are you still there?
I don't like anything about typing. Every morning when I get ready for work, I start crying. What's wrong with me?
You hate your work. It's normal. Have a good day.
So not everyone has a job as cool as mine. I admit that. And sometimes you have to climb your way through. And life is more than work, or at least it should be. This is a real challenge for those of us that like technology. Because I know you've been there. So we have this thing that's a hobby and it's fun, and then we realize we can make a job out of it. And then we can make a career out of it. And then it's drudge work. And it turns out, though, we're okay at it. And so what we do is we build companies or join companies, and we become managers. And what we do is we go out and look for the young people who are thrilled by this and have this hobby that is a passion, there's a spark that we used to have and we burned out of ourselves, and we hire you and we burn that spark out of you. Maybe that's not the ideal way to do this, and that's a little fatalistic. But there's more to work. But if what you do is work all day on technology issues and then go home and hack at things, and when you get tired of hacking at things, you play video games. You're not really disconnecting much, and it does actually compound it. So we need to be prepared. for ourselves, our friends, families, peers, communities. One of my favorite quotes is from Dan Gear. Security is too wide to master, too deep to know, and too fast to photograph. I want to stress that Dan Gear said that, right? I mean, if Dan Gear, if you're not familiar with Dan Gear, find anything he's ever done, said, or written, and you'll understand why I do that. So a few months ago, Joey put this poll up on Twitter, and I thought it was interesting. You work in DFIR? Okay, self-explanatory, right? You know, so we have some challenges.
Everybody must get on.
As Bob sang years ago, everybody must get owned. I mean, that's the reality, especially if you're on the blue team, if you're on the defense side. But if you're on the red team side, it gets depressing too, because Larry Pesci tells a story, co-host on the Security Weekly. He's like, when he first started doing pen testing, every time he got in, you know, once he got total compromise of the target, that meant that he had succeeded, and he would treat himself to a steak dinner. And then he got sick of eating steak. Because you win, right? You win when you attack. And when you have good clients, good customers as a pen tester, red teamer, gets harder and harder every year. You have to go to the edges. But you generally get in unless they scope you out of it. But everybody must get owned. I mean, that's our thing. Everybody's compromised. It's a mess. So it's a challenge. We have these externalities, not to sound like an economist, where we're not in control of our own world. So the job is challenging. So where does this leave us? The infosec pose on a good day. And these are the good days, because the bad days, there's a pigeon crapping on our heads. All right, maybe we'll back it off a little bit. We can have the feline face palm instead. But how do we cope? And not just cope. I want to survive and thrive so that you can make a difference in your own life, in your family's life, in your friends' lives, so you can lead happy, healthy lives. I have a reputation of being a cranky old man. It's well deserved, but people are starting to see through that. So I'll just let you know, I actually want you to be happy. I also want you to be happy and productive, so some of the old folks here can retire someday. So here's the goal. Distill it right down. Here's what we want to avoid. That's not McDonald's. That's the hospital with the machines that go bing hooked up to you. We don't want to be there, right? We want to be a lot better. So, disclaimer, I'm not an expert in anything. The last time that I was anywhere near expert, it was in late 70s and early 80s Renault automobiles. Yes, I worked on Renaults and Peugeots and Volvos and Saabs and things in my past life. I'm a former mechanic. Having worked on Renault and Peugeot, I think gave me the masochism required to work in infosec too. But seek real expertise for problems. I'm not an expert. I'm an amateur guide at best. I still get lost myself. Added this slide. So one of the things I've discovered, so memory kind of goes away with age and it gets weird. But one of the things that when I was dealing with some stuff many years ago, my doctor pointed out, is like, hey, you're dealing with some stuff and your memory's going to suffer. And I'm like, oh, you know, it really is. And the older you get, every time you get into a high stress incident, the worse it gets. And it's like, we legalized recreational marijuana in Massachusetts, but I don't have enough short-term memory left to remember to pick some up. So it's just as well that I'm not, doing that. So stress, and do we, any of us need to remember anything in what we do? We don't have to know anything anymore. We just ask Google anyway. But and then we have to talk about a couple more things. So impostor syndrome. This industry is amazing because you can go into a room and there's Johnny freaking Long right there. Oh my God, Johnny's in the front row of my talk. Oh my God, I'm surrounded by brilliant, hardworking people. I'm insignificant. I don't know why you are here. What's wrong with it? Impostor syndrome tears up our industry, and that lack of confidence is a real challenge. And most people come to accept it. You're cool. You're smart. You're engaged. You're interested. You may be full of crap. Sometimes we all are. It's a little secret. You know, a lot of us fake it until you make it. That's not great advice, but we've all been there. So, you know, plunge on. Have talks with people who actually know what's going on and listen to them, because this is actually debilitating for a lot of people and then adds to stress. And unfortunately, not everybody has imposter syndrome. Most of the people that I know that have bad imposter syndrome really it's imposter syndrome. They shouldn't feel that way. On the flip side, if you're unfamiliar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, that's the people who are so incompetent that they think they're competent. We do have a few of those in the industry, not naming names, but you can probably, if you've been in the business for a while, you'll fill in a name or two there for your own sake. So getting into the more practical, a group of us have done some work on formal stress and burnout. And in those studies, in the psychological documentation, there are 3 key words that we talk about in that. One of them is good. It's efficacy. Am I effective? And it's very important to say this is personal. Your company got popped, but you did the best you could, and you're doing the best you can to keep it from happening again and clean up. You can feel good even though the overall situation is not great. We as an industry can say we're here together, we're making connections, we're trying to advance the craft, even though the state is, we're kind of screwed with the state of security, right? But we can feel good. So if efficacy. The 2 bad ones are exhaustion and cynicism. Exhaustion is self-explanatory. It's not the good exhaustion you get after a run, not that I run, or, you know, working on a project or something. It's, you know, that good tired you get. That's okay. It's when you're just, and then cynicism, which honestly in our industry, that's our core competency. We have statistical data to prove this, not just the research that the group I worked with has done. But something needs to be said about cynicism, because in this industry, and as a hacker, even if you're outside of it, even if you're a hobbyist, skepticism is really important, right? Opening this cover will void the warranty. It's like, no user serviceable parts. Challenge accepted, right? You know. But then you slide over, you know, buy this 1U pizza box with a bunch of LEDs and you'll be safe. George Carlin quote, for a lot of us old cynics, I like to point this out. Inside every cynical person, there is a disappointed idealist. And if you remember that about yourself as you're being cynical, you won't be quite as toxic to people around you. So as I mentioned, some of us did a study on burnout, and almost half of the people in our study had no warning indicators out of those 3. And when I started going to the other side, how do we avoid you folks being a statistic in the next time we do the true burnout study? Let's look at the people who had no indicators at all. It's a better random number generator than the NSA will sell to RSA. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so moving on. Who wants some coffee? It's the afternoon, getting a little tired, you've had some lunch. I'm just a storyteller, and I'm great at bad metaphors and bad analogies. So imagine you're a happy little coffee bean on a mountainside somewhere in a nice tropical climate, and some guy plucks you off of a branch. You get picked, packed, shipped, roasted, ground, and then, as if that's not enough, you get boiling hot water poured over you, or worse yet, high pressure steam. That doesn't sound like our jobs at all, does it? Back to that things we love. Add hot water under extreme pressure, boom. Now, the result. Good, bad? Depends on how you like your coffee. If you got it right so far, you have an opportunity to have a great shot of espresso. Maybe you prefer an Americano or a latte. So you add your flavorings, you add your enhancements, and this is how you come up with that cup of coffee that makes you happy. It's not too bitter. It's not undrinkable. It's a happy little cup of coffee, right? From the stress and burnout stuff, here are these 4 phases of these things: burdens, coping, burnout, and impact. And we want to stay above these. We want to look at our burdens, and we want to look at the coping skills, and try to filter that out so what comes out is we have a happy little cup of coffee as a life that we're happy to share with folks. So being a hardcore data scientist, I asked on Twitter how people cope with work, because Twitter is a great place for unbiased, no, never mind. I got a lot of answers. I mean, seriously, I got over 600 unique respondents that gave me well over 700 answers between publicly on Twitter, privately on Twitter, via email, via text message, via carrier pigeon. It was amazing, the response I got. One of the early ones struck me as, it was great. This is a service I offer, but ask before you start stroking my beard. It gets weird. Yeah, no, no, not really. Yes, and you may have noticed that my version of PowerPoint has become sentient and heckles me. So anyway, a couple of things became clear. There are big stressors and there are little stresses, and we could call them transient and persistent. Whatever you want to do. This is a gross oversimplification, but it works really well for a huge number of people that I talked to over the past decade in getting into this, and others who are doing research. The coping mechanisms have to make sense for what you're up against. I know people that have been in really less than ideal jobs for a long time, and the reason they're able to do it is they put all of those little coping skills that we tell you how to do to make it through a bad morning or a bad phone call, and they just stack up a stack of coping skills so that they can continue to be miserable but slightly less miserable for years on end. I also know a couple of people that have none of those skills at all, and so they jump to a good job and are gone within 9 to 12 months and have been doing that for 15 years. Now, if your career is moving forward and you're advancing in technology, we tend to be a little bit more tolerant of job hopping, but once you're in 40s or 50s and you've never held a job for more than 2 years, you're probably going to have a problem. So it's aligning the things, and you have to have the context. Don't put bandages on mortally wounded jobs. Don't change jobs annually because you don't have the skills it takes to do it. So we are a bit north of Texas, but some of you may know I was born and raised in Texas, and the beauty of that is it gives me an excuse for aberrant behavior for the entire rest of my life. It's like, what the hell is Jack doing? You know he's from Texas? Oh, okay. So every few years in Texas, they decide they're going to secede. So we have your basic redneck Super Duty there with a cherry picker in the bed, and this sends you a really clear message, right? Context matters though, because if you look and you see it's got a Massachusetts license plate, it sends you a really clear message. It just sends a very different message. You have to understand the situation. So I guess what I'm saying is sometimes the right thing to do is take a big step. This is not the time to take a big step. Back away slowly. So anecdata, common answers, back to that Twitter stuff, it's got to be good. So the how do you cope? A bunch of people responded pretty candidly, badly, not well, poorly, cry, rant. I think those fall into the less than ideal. The one that was most useful and second most common I can boil down to do something, preferably outdoors. Physical activity, ranging from putting the phone on Do Not Disturb, getting up and doing a lap of the building and coming back. The last time I had a support job, I used to reach that point, get up, walk 200 yards to Starbucks, get a giant vat of caffeine, walk back. I was okay because the caffeine didn't compound the problem, I assure you. But, get out to, whatever it is, powerlifting, camping, kayaking, yoga, whatever. A lot of exercise stuff, a lot of physical activity. Get out and do something. Single most common answer, except for one that's coming up. So moving on, another one that was in the top 3, so would have been right behind this, I think. A broad range of music. So whether you're into mellow 70s soft rock or early punk, that's the Sonics. If you're into music and don't know who the Sonics are, you need to find that out. The Sonics did punk 5-8 years before there was punk. The Sonics did grunge decades before grunge. That little song, Strychnine, is from 64, 65. Roses are red, poison is blue, strychnine is good for what's ailing you. Anyway, so wherever you find entertainment, people find creating music, playing music, just jamming the earbuds in, although that isolates you from other people. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not great. But people just find music is great. I have some of the most eclectic music tastes. When I allow one of my systems to do things based on what I've listened to, I go from pre-war French jazz to punk to surf guitar to Luna Lee, who's very strange. If you haven't heard of Luna Lee, complete sidetrack. Luna Lee is a Korean woman, young woman, that plays the gagayam, which is a traditional Korean instrument, stringed instrument. She put thinner strings on it and retuned them for Western stringings and does all sorts of hard rock and classic rock songs on a traditional Korean instrument. It's crazy. It's amazing. Anyway, so music, whatever does it. Some of us like really edgy stuff. Some people like to be mellow stuff. If Adele does it for you, that's cool, right? Her popular stuff doesn't do it for me, but she's actually got a killer voice. There's stuff out there. Don't judge. Listen to stuff that makes you happy. Of course, that does lead somewhere. Oh, come on. So yes, sedation, alcohol. This is the number one answer by far. How do we cope? Booze. Most of us feel bad that we drink too much. That's about the most positive I can give you on this one. I am guilty of this. I drink more than I should. I encourage other people to do it because one of the things I do at conferences is I give talks on bitters and classic cocktails, and I've done introductory home bartending workshops and things like that. Moderation, my friends. We feel bad about that. But then we move on to drugs, legal and otherwise. You can look at me and you can figure out that I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And I'm not going to be judgmental about your stuff unless you're screwing other people over with it or damaging yourself, which then screws other people over with it. But we've had folks in our industry and in our lives who thought they were tougher than drugs. They almost all end up in the same place. Don't go there, seriously. If you're doing things under supervision, but a lot of times our medical establishment likes to give people things that most people react okay to. Like I said, not being judgmental. Currently, a lot of states have legalized recreational marijuana. More have legalized medical marijuana. I can tell you for a fact that anybody at DEA or anywhere else that dismisses anything about medical marijuana, I just hope they never have to understand how wrong they are and watch a loved one suffer. But in our political climate, marijuana is tricky because it's still federally illegal. It'll keep you from ever coming back into the US if you're not an American citizen, because you've done illegal drugs by the federal standards, even though it was legal in Denver or wherever you went. So just be cautious. The world's a mess. I don't know, I don't have a point there, but that was a really common one. Moving on to something else, friends and family. This one's interesting because is this a problem source or a solution source? Yes. Support, especially mutual support, really rocks. One-sided support in short bursts is okay. Everyone needs a hand sometimes. When it becomes, I don't want to say parasitic, but when it stays one-sided for too long, it starts to be problematic. But connecting with friends and family is a huge thing for us. This is challenging. Disconnect, unplug. If you were more trusting, I would say close your eyes, tilt your head back and relax. Join me on a train ride through the Scottish Highlands or wherever you want to take that train. Walk along the beach with me. Just disconnect, unplug, walk away from it all. Now, of course, some of you have just seen the hypocrisy in that because I recorded those things while I was on that train in the Scottish Highlands and as I was walking across that beach in coastal Georgia. So maybe I could learn a little bit too. But really, get out. Now, the challenge is that if you do, you come back and you're like, ah! While wearing an Apple Watch. No, it makes, there are some companies that have started to see the value of this. Volkswagen in Germany, in Wolfsburg, they disconnect you from your email, depending on your job title. You are disconnected and don't have access to email from like 2 hours after you are off shift until an hour before. You can't get your email. So go home. That'd work really well in the American software industry. I can see that taking over Silicon Valley, can't you? So more answers. A lot of variations on mindfulness and meditation. A surprising few did professional therapy. And I think that's part of that. We still have a stigma about mental health. We need to get over it. A whole bunch of productivity tools, which aren't necessarily stress related, but if getting things done or any of those sort of productivity tools works for you, then you're more efficient and you're less stressed. Find those tools that work for you. A lot of people love their pets, various hobbies, video games, which can be challenging. If you are like my son, who is 31 and does support for a software, security product, he gets up in the morning and turns on the work computer, hits the bathroom, works for an hour or so, goes downstairs, grabs breakfast and tea, comes back, and like 8 or 9 hours later, he turns off the work computer, eats dinner in front of the TV, and then goes back up and plays video games until he falls asleep. I'm not sure that that's good, but it's working for him. So just don't let these things get too far away from you. So edge cases. Not sure if these were all serious. Carving cameo images of dead emperors in the cream of Oreo cookies. Nihilism, that's us. I will say the covering yourself in peanut butter and howling at the moon came from an Australian, so that may be an actual practice. Those of you who have come out of the military might appreciate redneck golf. That tends to be 556 at 500 yards, tends to kind of tell me about your background a little bit. Sex, drugs, and death metal. Cool, whatever. So now I'm going to be mean to you. Sometimes you figure this out when life kicks you hard. I don't recommend this, but it works really well. So I'm going to get really personal here. When my mother died of cancer when I was 31, that was not enough of a kick to get me to realize what was important. When I was diagnosed with bladder cancer and became used to a regular procedure that if you've had your legs just crossed, and if you haven't, lucky you, they're not malignant, it won't kill you. You're just going to have to deal with having tumors taken out of your bladder every few years. Okay, whatever. That wasn't enough. Not quite 3 years ago, my best friend, my wife, was diagnosed with clear cell ovarian cancer. She passed away 3 days before Christmas. We were just short of our 37th wedding anniversary. We met when she was 14 and I was 15, and we started dating a couple of months later. That one did it, by the way. That got my attention. That's like, oh. So at work, we've launched a new platform, which is the future of the company I've been with for almost 6 years. I want them to succeed because I think we have some cool people and do some cool stuff. I want them to succeed because I got a lot of options. If somebody calls me and needs something, personally, that goes way ahead of making sure that I deliver whatever it is I'm supposed to do to help that product, because you people matter more to me. Don't let it take somebody blowing a hole in your life that sized to step back and think about what's important to you. By the way, just to head it off, I am doing great thanks to people in this community and some people outside of it. The number of people that have been supportive of me has been absolutely amazing. If you are new to this, especially if you watch Twitter, you will find there are a lot of really unpleasant people out there. Turns out they're not that many, and they're just really loud, and they're an amazing bunch of people. So I'm going to zip through here and get out of that. Let's crawl back out of that. But don't let yourself get to the point where it takes something that brutal to wake you the heck up. Don't face challenges alone if you can avoid it. Don't make employees face challenges alone. Here's one that you know. Do more. Wait, I'm already stressed. It's got to be stuff that you want to do. Satisfying and rewarding things. Helping other people falls into that category for me. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but that's all right. Volunteer, mentor, teach, speak, share, help. Teaching is phenomenal. You may have just discovered InMap and just realized that InMap can help you diagnose basic problems with an email server. There are some of us who have known that for a really long time. There are a lot more people who have never heard of InMap and don't know that you can do that with it, and you bring a new perspective. You bring your perspective as someone who maybe has grown up with technology and never had to dig into the nuts and bolts. Your perspective matters. Your voice matters. And when you teach somebody something, you have to learn it better yourself. Mentorship is fantastic. If you have any hypocritical tendencies, which every human does, it's fantastic because you mentor somebody, you're on the phone call, you're like, whatever you do, don't do this. And this is like career poison if you go that way, so don't go there. And then you hang up the phone and you slam your head into the desk because you see yourself having done that repeatedly in your career, which is how you know to tell them that, and then you realize you're doing it again right now. What a hypocrite. Hopefully they listen and learn better than me. Learn something new, education's work, it has to be fun, right? Or, move your career forward. This is one that somebody brought up to me recently and I hadn't really thought about, but boy, is this true. You're the iPhone hacker dude. Well, what if life changes and you're no longer the iPhone hacker dude? We all know you're the Hackers for Charity guy. Nope, you are Johnny. Hackers for Charity is something amazing that we know you for, but you're Johnny. And if you let that define you, you are not your job, you're not your skill. You are a person who has skills and interests. After a conversation at a recent event, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Skip through this stuff. If you're a manager or employer, do you have all of the talented and trained people you need, and is it easy to hire them? Oh, that's too many words. Capacity to influence, or if you have some input into your job, you won't hate it as much. Amazing. If you undermine people's autonomy, you keep them from being productive and make them cynical and distant. Yeah. If you feel some sense of control and understanding, we engage with work better. Duh. This is ancient stuff. As a manager or employer, provide feedback constantly. Oh, and by the way, when dumb stuff happens, it's like, all right, look, I got to explain this to you. We're about to IPO, and that means anybody logical is either locked in a closet or killed. So just hang on, okay? Just hang on. Yes, it makes no sense. It's an IPO. My joke, you can pass this one. For those of you who have been in the software industry, or other industries and gone through this process. Familiar with collective nouns. So a group of cattle is, a herd of cattle, and group of sheep is a flock. And my favorite one is a gathering of crows is a murder. Do you know what you call a feral gathering of vice presidents? It's an IPO. I may have opinions. Manage workloads, workload distribution. If you burn your people out, you have to do the work for them. That's bad as a manager. Let people disconnect, maybe force it, offer education quickly. I travel a lot now. I had cut way back on travel for obvious reasons, and I'm enjoying it. But I'm not doing the sales engineer or sales rep or short engagement pen tester kind of travel. Travel for work is not the same as travel for fun, but you can make it better. So you don't always know where you're going to end up. You have to actually interact with people and ask them about your neighborhood. So for example, when you check into the hotel, you don't always know how rough the neighborhood is. You're not always going to see a crow with a shiv with an ankle bracelet on that's, on parole, right? I mean, it's rarely this obvious that you're in a bad neighborhood. You've got to ask around. So if you're me, which is a big white dude, male being critical here to what I'm about to say. I spend a lot of time in bars. I make friends with bartenders around the US and Canada. Single old white dude, that's not a big deal. This is one of the places, women, you may have noticed this, life isn't fair. That doesn't always work as well for women. But bartenders tend to be underpaid, but well connected, and they will tell you what's safe and what is not safe, where the bargains are. Sometimes if I'm in a tourist area, I will just walk up to a cop and be like, hey, I don't want to be paperwork for you or anybody else on the force tonight, so tell me how far I shouldn't walk, Ask. It's like, I don't want to be paperwork for you. They're like, okay, so you have their attention. Find out and get out and enjoy it. So I didn't realize that Tulsa has a pretty cool bar and food scene in that little arts district. There's some cool stuff there. It's like, oh, look at that. That's cool. It's amazing. So water. This is just straight up. Drink more water. That's it. Just keep drinking more water. If you fly a lot, here's a trick. Take a decongestant before you fly, even if you're not plugged up. So when my doctor told me years ago, you're less likely to get snuffly. Your ears are less likely to go pop, pop, pop. If you have, heat in the winter, if the heat's on, air's dry, your nasal passages dry up, simple saline spray for a few days before, no cracked skin inside your nasal passages, you are much less likely to catch whatever dread disease the sniffling child behind you spews on you every time they cough. So you do like I do and live on coffee and alcohol. They're dehydrating, so just be careful. Pack better. There's a whole nother talk on that, so we don't do it. Helping others. You're not a professional. Don't act like one. But you can be a friend, a mentor, a peer. Back to the title of this, back to this that we hear. It's like, put on your own mask before you try to help others. You've got to be in a place to help other people. Back to Bob Dylan for a little bit of advice.
I would not feel so all alone.
Just don't feel alone. Be there for somebody. Just listening is often. And I'm going to close out with a story about a guitar. The story actually starts not far from here. Well, for large states in the middle of America. We lost B.B. King about 2 years ago. His guitar was named Lucille. You can buy a Lucille guitar from Gibson, ES355, unique because the 335 is the one you usually see. 355 is a stereo. B.B. was one of the few people that played stereo electric guitars. He was one of the few guitarists of his caliber, too, ever. So anyway, you know about the Lucille story? In the winter of 1949, King was playing a dance hall in Twist, Arkansas. In order to heat the hall, old school dance halls, plywood building just thrown up, tradition was to take a 55-gallon drum, cut the top off, half fill it with kerosene, drop a match in, and that was the source of heat for the dance hall. These are ramshackle wooden buildings. You can see where this is going, can't you? During a performance, two men began to fight, knocking over the barrel. So now we've got like 25 gallons of burning kerosene running across a bare wood floor in a wood building. Hall burst into flames, triggered an evacuation. Once he got outside, BB realized he had left his brand new $35 guitar on the stage, and he ran back in and got it. That was my new guitar. $30 actually. I got the dollar. Next day, they're getting ready for the next show. They hear about it on the radio. 2 people died in the fire. Others were injured. Turns out the 2 guys were fighting over a woman named Lucille. He named that guitar Lucille to remind him never to do anything that stupid again. And the reason you see a lot of Lucille's around at Hard Rocks and other things, they're real Lucille's if he's signed them. He didn't need that guitar. This isn't Dick Dale's Beast or some other heavily customized thing. He needed a guitar of a certain type, but it's just a guitar, right? It's just a guitar. Don't run back in and die over a $30 Gibson. So some sources. No, those are sources of stress, not sources. If you're really interested in this, it's some pop psychology, but the American Psychological Association every year does an article, a report, Stress and Burnout. They rotate through topics. Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter are the folks that did the seminal research into stress and burnout. Some friends have done stuff. I was actually on the Rally Security podcast recently where we talked about stress and burnout. Southern Fried Security also did one recently on the topic. Very personal. Both Martin Fisher and Joseph Scoli have faced that. Interesting because Joseph is pretty young. He's yet to hit 30, and he's gotten ground up by this, and has come out the other side. And so I guess what I'm saying is this is not the end. There's still more talks to come, and it doesn't end when the conference ends, because hopefully you've met new people here. You've made some new connections. You've learned some things. and you're going to take better care of yourself so that you can take better care of others, so that we can all be one big happy hacker family. And that's way too idealistic for me, but seriously, this community is amazing. And in the past few years, I've had a lot of folks in their late 20s come to me and say, when I got into this industry, you guys were doing that stress and burnout stuff and it was stupid. I was like, what is wrong with these old people? They're stupid. It's like, this is a great job. I'm getting great pay. I get my choice of like 10 different companies to work for. This is great. I mean, 3 people within about a 2-month period came up to me and started pretty much exactly like that. And then they said, but now that I've been doing it for a couple of years, you got a few minutes to chat. So seriously, man, to the young people, this is cool. Know that stresses are coming. We didn't even get into the fact that a lot of my peers now have kids in college they're trying to pay for while trying to pay for putting their parents into the assisted living thing, right? Life does ugly things to you that are unrelated to your job. Take care of yourself, have fun, and remember that, things are going to be challenging. There are tools, there are people to reach out for, there are tools to make this better. And, other than that, let's just change the world and make it a better place. So thank you very much. If anybody's got questions, I'll field them. I'll be around for the afternoon, and you can find me on that internet thing.